Hi everyone, welcome to this episode of Sewing Snacks and Hacks. My name is Shareen, and for today's episode we're going to address the 4 common problems often faced when we use the sewing machine. Okay, so the very first problem we're going to talk about is when your stitches are looking wonky. So over here, what I mean by that is the tension on the front, okay, is quite loose. The threads are quite loose compared to the back as well. They are also fairly loose, okay. Now in this case, the tension in the front is a lot tighter than the back, so this problem is happening. Now for this example here, the stitches are even, so the front is actually nice and flat. When you flip to the back, it looks the same as well, nice and flat. Okay, so this is the kind of stitch that you're going for. Now, so if you have this problem, we're going to solve it today. So the very first thing we're going to do is look at the sewing machine. Now I know a lot of you actually know that this dial over here is called the tension dial, and that is one of the places we can go when we have a tension problem, but in most of the cases it's actually not the main reason that's causing your tension problems. Okay, so generally for thinner fabrics, we go somewhere between 3 maybe tension. For thicker fabrics we go thicker, maybe 5 or 6, but hardly will go all the way to 7 or 9. Now in this case, we're going to solve it step by step. The first thing we are going to do is check from the top down. So I call this the top down approach. Now the first thing you want to check is to make sure that your top threads are running smoothly. Okay, so over here, this is my top thread. Now very often, sometimes, because of how the threads are made, I've seen some whereby the threads actually get stuck in the plastic over here. Okay, so you have to make sure and check that the threads are moving very smoothly. So when I pull it, there's nothing obstructing, so this is good. Also, just make sure that the thread stoppers that you use are about the same size, if not slightly bigger than your thread spools, so that they can glide nicely above the threads. Okay, now the next thing is I will always retread the top first, just in case anything that I did or any of the tension discs are not properly engaged. So this is how we'll do the threading. So I will remove the threads. Over here, I will take this out from the needle first, and then moving over to the top, remove the stopper, and then I'll pull everything out at one go. Okay, then I'll retread this again. So I'm just going to use a brighter color for demonstration purposes. So over here, I slide my thread here using the thread stopper. Slide this in, and I'm going to glide this accordingly. Now when you are threading your machine, you have to make sure that your presser foot is not down. Okay, it has to be up. Alright, so that there's no tension disengaged when you're doing your threading. So continue, and then over here, finally put it through. You can use the auto threader on your machine. I generally like to use manual threading. Okay, then go from front to back. Alright, so this is one of the ways to check and make sure that you've got the right tension. Now the second way is actually, if still it doesn't work, then you would do something to the bobbin thread. So I'm going to remove the bobbin from below. Now most of the time, a lot of times this bobbin is threaded wrongly, and that's what's causing the tension problem. So give a check. So on my machine, my tension direction for the bobbin should actually be based on this direction, okay? So going this way down. So likewise, on my bobbin, I will shape the thread in the shape of a letter P, and then I will put it down, glide it into the groove, and slide it in according to the direction for your sewing machine, okay? And then slide it down and test again. Now, if still there is a problem with this, then I would recommend that you could actually change your needles. Okay, when you're changing your needles, you have your screwdriver, okay, and then of course your machine comes with a pack of needles. You can use those, but I would like to recommend these needles. Actually, they're Microtex needles, and if you've ever encountered problems with your fabric like that, okay, where you know it's really thin, and when you look up close, your needles kind of cause punctured holes along the fabrics. Now you really want to make sure you get the right size needles, but at the same time, for really thin fabrics, I strongly recommend the Microtex needles. Okay, they're really great because they hardly cause holes like that, and they are very fine tipped. Okay, so over here I'm just going to take out my needles. So I'm going to go for number 10. Okay, that's the average size over here. And then I'm going to open up the screw on the side here. So remember to turn off your machine when you're doing so, but I still need the light to show you guys. So over here, you notice that there's a flat edge and there's a rounded edge here. So make sure the rounded edge is facing you and the flat edge is facing the back. Don't worry if you forget, because it can only go in one way. Okay, then tighten the screw up and then put the thread in once again and test your machine. So by now, if you've tried everything, you've tried rethreading, you've tried changing the needle, changing the tension, and it still doesn't work, there's a high chance there could be something wrong with your machine, okay? So you can get that checked at a professional sewing machine repair person, okay, for your sewing machine. So I know some of you have some concerns when you start sewing and you wonder like, hey, when I turn to the back, how come I see this like thick threads getting caught over here? I want something, you know, as clean as this, okay? So in this case, normally what you can do, there are two ways. Firstly, you will make sure you have a grip of both the top and bottom threads, okay? So they are currently both in different colors now. So I would have to hold on to both the top and the bottom threads when I sew. Okay, so like that. So I'm going to do an example. So holding on to the threads, I'm going to start sewing. Do the reverse. Okay, so now that because we've held down, you'll see that this no longer happens. Okay, this clump no longer happens. Now the other way is to have a start and ender fabric. Okay, so it could be any scrap piece of fabric that you use to start and end your sewing with. Okay, so this is what you'll do. You will place your ender or starter right in the beginning when you sew. Okay, so now, so maybe I'm going over here. Of course, once you reach your fabric, you have to remember to reverse. And then you continue down. Okay, right to the end, wherever you want. And then you can have an ender fabric. But remember to reverse. And then So of course, because you've done the reverse stitching, you can now cut it away and you flip to the back and you'll see it's nice and clean at the same time. Okay, so remember to do your reverse stitchings before you reach the next fabric. So another common problem we have is when you're sewing and you're done and you want to lift everything up to remove, you lift your presser foot up, your needle up, and sometimes you still get stuck. Okay, so if you feel that it's still stuck, what happens is sometimes the thread hasn't reached a full revolution. So what you can do is over on your hand wheel, just make sure you turn it towards yourself in this direction. So turn it towards yourself and then make sure your lever comes up all the way, and that means that your hand wheel has completed one full revolution and you can finally pull this out. Okay, so if you experience any jamming, you can't pull it out, try this method. Okay. Okay, so the last bonus tip is sometimes when we are sewing and you don't have a fabric marker with you, you don't want to use pencil or pen that might cause a stain on your clothing. So over here, we sometimes use the friction pen. So as you can see, basically it says that the temperature, if you exceed 60 degrees Celsius, the ink will become colorless, and if it's to restore the color, you can bring it to the freezer under -10 degrees Celsius. So of course, because there's ink on it, ultimately you still need to wash it off, but it's really handy when you're doing your sewing. So if, let's say, for example, you want to make a marking of where your pocket should be, so you can make the marking and then simply bring this to the iron. And there you have it. It's completely gone. Okay, no more marks at all. And that's a really, really useful friction pen for sewing. So I hope now you know how to make your stitches neat and beautiful. And also, if you know, we actually have our e-classes where you learn online with us. But if you have any questions, we have this thing called a lifeline where you can book an appointment with us on WhatsApp and we will be there to help you. So see you at www.fashionmakerspace.com.